Hi, I'm Impo and I'm from never opening Blender before to making this 3D Vtuber model from scratch. And why would I do that? Am I insane, you ask? I was just super curious after teaching myself how to make 2D models and then seeing all the cool things and accessible things that 3D modeling can do. What do you firstly need to make a good 3D model though? You're going to need a 3D creator software, I use Blender, and you're going to need a really good reference sheet for a really good model. Now what do I mean by a real good reference sheet? You ideally just want a front view, a side view, and a back view in a T-pose or an A-pose. A lot of really skilled people won't need this, but it's still really useful. Like, it's still really good to have. However, where am I gonna get this from? A reference sheet? Am I gonna use my own? No, that'd be silly. No, I mean, I'm gonna need a guinea pig. So I went to Twitter and I made a post asking people if they wanted to be a guinea pig for me. And yeah, there were some replies. Yeah. Now, because I couldn't find a design that was particularly simple, with an A pose or a T pose, with a front and a side view, I kind of had to pick on what I can have and what I can't have. In the end, I picked a design that vibed with me pretty well and seemed simple enough. Why are you zooming into the off-shoulder coat? Why are you zooming into that? And just to make sure you all know how intense this is, once again, I have no idea what I'm doing. I am just a Twitch streamer, a VTuber. I owned a 3D model, but I didn't create it. I just used a 3D VTuber software. I have never opened Blender. Let me give you the rundown. First, we make the mesh. Then, we texture it. Afterwards, we weight paint it and throw it over to Unity. This won't be a guide per se, I'm obviously in no position to teach, but I'll talk you through what we're roughly doing and the problems I faced and how I overcame them. To do one-to-one topology, we need to use that clean reference sheet you mentioned earlier and place it back behind a scene and basically try to form a starting shape around it. Topology is a bunch of vertices that make edges, which is the black lines that you see. It can look very confusing, but the most important thing to keep in mind is that you want to keep things as square as possible, rather than triangles. Triangles are very stinky, very icky, you don't want to see them, otherwise they'll stretch weight later and just won't look clean. With that in mind, the first problem I ran into was because of my lack of knowledge of how vertices, edges, and faces work together. I was trying to figure out how to make a hole for the neck as per the guide I was watching, which I'll talk about a bit more later. To my limited knowledge, I followed the steps, but when I tried deleting the components to make the hole for the neck, it just the form of the faces is kinda creepy. My uncle bigger brain didn't really understand the problem to find a solution, so I kept starting from scratch until I did it right. Through trial and error, this is how I learned how faces work, and if it looks like this, then there's a literal underlying problem with connecting vertices or faces not lining up cleanly or correctly. And this is a result of a torso, and you can see it's starting to take shape and formation, and it has a functioning neck, so thumbs up from me. Wanna know what real nightmare fuel is though? Making the face. Prepare yourself and take a look at this. So, a big part of topology is removing vertices and adding them again for a clean topology with weight paint in mind for later. But the process is the same as a body, we try to get as one-to-one as possible with a reference sheet. Easy, right? Clothes, right. Yeah, models need clothes, right. So, clothes actually found much more easier, add way more freedom, and just easier to move around. What I did for this was copy the base body mesh and just slowly morph it until it was just about right with a reference sheet with clothing pieces. It also makes it way more easier for weight painting transfer later. Surprisingly, this leads me to my next issue. Before I even started on this project, I thought it'd be too much on my own because as helpful as Google is, when you're looking for specific issues, it can be a struggle. It can have out-of-date information or not the most efficient solution. Before I even started this journey, I approached a few content creators I've known in the past, and I asked them if they would help me with basic Blender knowledge for my journey, and they agreed. It gave me relief to have support, especially for my super dumb basic questions. But I never got a response when a project started. So, with Google being unhelpful with specific searches, struggling to find resources, and not finding any other individuals I could reach out to, it started to get a bit rough. During the majority of this process, I was using Rue's Guide and Colosso, which was super helpful and served its purpose, though there were times where it clashed with my learning style. This is because a lot of the process felt more of a do what I do instead of why are we doing the thing that we're doing. So when there's something that's different with a model, or when I was stuck, there's no real answer. Or no answer that I could figure out at least. And it's totally fine if do what I do works for you and helps you learn, but for me, it wasn't that effective for how I develop skills. But this is how you learn. By trial and error, and losing years of your lifespan in the process. So because of these reasons, the stage took a little bit longer than it probably should have with self-taught trial and error, but I learned the basics of Blender and how to interact with software, so I can't really complain. In a way, I'm kind of glad it took longer, because I had more opportunities to learn the basics where I would have struggled later. And funnily enough, after I finished the model, 3D content got pushed to me more, so I learned a lot afterwards too, though it would have been handy to know back then. Unless you're your model to look like a statue that plays pranks on people and gives children trauma, you want to give some paint on it. And to do that, we need to do some texturing. Honestly, this is my favourite step, well actually no, hold on, before I say that, let's dial it back. Before we texture, we need to UV unwrap. What is UV unwrapping? Well, let me tell you. It's a pain in the ass. You know how a shirt has seams on it? UV unwrapping is just like cutting those seams and laying out in front of you to paint on, which includes splitting the body up using seams to separate the mouth from the face and so on. When it comes to drawing on the unwraps, Blender tools don't quite cut it, so I draw basic shapes and colours as guidelines to follow, and I export texture to Clip Studio. After drawing the details in Clip Studio, I save the texture and import it back into Blender. There's not much else to say about this step, but as an artist it's my favourite. Just something about the whole grayness and adding colour to it and actually coming to life is just a huge part in this process for me. The dreaded weight painting. Sounds strange out of context, right? But trust me, it's a bit different from actually painting weights. Weight painting is basically binding the mesh to the bone using something that looks like a heat map to tell the bone how much control it has over part of the mesh. Red is full control, and blue is no control. For example, the lower leg joint will have main control in the center, with the outer edges softened into a blue so there's no clipping in the joints when a model moves. This is how joints connect to each other and objects, with weight painted bones. My experience with this was not a normal one. On the day that I got to the stage, it happened to be Blender's anniversary, and someone mentioned to me that a certain add-on was free on the market, and it'd be perfect for what I'm doing right now. This add-on in question was called Auto Rig Pro. This costed months of my model progress. It worked for the most part. It was kind of weird for Pocket to be connected to the thumb, and for shoulder to be connected to everything. Fixing this took a really good number of weeks. While working on it, I asked around and nobody really knew how to handle the plugin. When I did fix it all manually, I went to export a file and it didn't really work with Unity. After days of researching, I just found one random comment on a forum that said AutoRig Pro is just not compatible with the ARM format or anything associated, though that contradicted what my friend said, though they couldn't really elaborate further. At this point, I figured it was just easier if I start from scratch, so that's what I did. Remember when I mentioned earlier about weight paint transfer? Let me briefly explain. So after weight painting the body, you can also select a bit of clothing or object above it, and then add weight from a body to the object. For example, a shirt. The bones and weights also work as physics too. Bones in this sense are kind of like the form parts if you're familiar with Live 2D. While editing this video, I happened to notice that quite a few people use AutoRig Pro in their workflow, but I still couldn't grasp how they incorporate it. Hopefully I can have more access to more information next time I work on a model. However, this stage wasn't all bad news. I want to give a special shout out to Azul who helped me figure out weight paint for the asymmetrical jacket especially. It was nice to have a helping hand. Right, the model's done! Wrapped in a nice little bow, but does it work? Is it actually track ready? We need to find out by making the model dance. You heard me right. By placing extensive animations in Unity, we can find out if the weight painting actually worked. Unity is where you can apply a shader, apply physics, and check for clipping and weight painting. Basically go back and forth between the softwares until there's minimal clipping, since it's pretty difficult for a 3D model to be perfect. Though apparently now there's add-ons you can check physics in a Blender, though I haven't tested myself, it sounds pretty useful. Once that is done, I export from Unity into VR format and test into Vinyang and Rodo. These are the more popular options of 3D modeling, but they're both very different how they track and interact, so I thought it'd be best to keep them both in mind. And boom, one 3D model completed. Could be better? For sure. Without ever opening Blender before, juggling law studies, illness, working people's life 2D rigs, and streaming, I'm gonna cut myself some slack if you don't mind. By the way, I'm working on my own 3D model for my stream, so be sure to check me out over on Twitch and let me know if there's a cool video and if you want to see some more, since I learn quite a few skills every year. I wanted to start and display this project just to show as an example that you can do things, you can do skills, you should step out of your comfort zone, do the things you want to do, and even if you're super busy, just make a little bit of time for it every day, and you'll get there. Yeah. Hopefully it encourages people to try new things or just step out of their typical comfort zone. I hope you guys enjoyed and let me know if you want to see more. Bye bye, have a good rest of your day. See you next time.